All right. Believe it or not, this is the 5th time that I am attempting to record a tutorial video on how to use your calculator to find standard deviation. So my camera is basically yelling at me about memory issues, so I'm going to do this a lot faster than I really wanted to. We'll go through it with the Casio, and then we will go through it with the TI. So if you have a Casio graphing calculator, you will be using your stats menu, which would be option number 2. You can either hit the number 2 or move the cursor over. Now that's going to open up a bunch of lists, and you're going to enter your data in the list. What I used for the data was this first set of data that we were working with in the lesson, which for me now was yesterday when I recorded it. So I entered that data in, and you should be able to enter it in just by pressing the number and then hitting execute. It's going to put the data in. Notice which list you're in, because you do have multiple lists, and the calculator is going to need to know which list it is trying to calculate your data for. So we're going to pick the calculate option. So we'll press F2. And what we want there is one variable statistics. That's what we're going to pick. But before you do that, come over here to your settings. So pick F6 and confirm that for one variable, you will be using list 1. If you do not want to use list 1, so you got stuck on a problem, you entered a bunch of data into list 1, you give up on the problem, you're going to go into another problem, you probably don't want to lose the data in list 1 because you're going to come back to that problem eventually. You don't want to reinvent the wheel here. So if you want to change the list, you would pick F1 for list and then enter the number of whatever list you want the calculator to look at. So going back, once you've confirmed that, yes, list 1, that's the one I want to work with, you would press F1 for one variable stats, and it will open up pretty much all your stats. So we've got X bar, or your mean, right at the top. So if you have a lot of numbers, you don't want to calculate the average by hand or the mean by hand, you can use your calculator. You've got that little capital sigma. If you add up all the numbers, you have 490. Now what we're interested in is population and sample standard deviation. Population standard deviation was 4.276, which matches the 4.276 that we calculated by hand. Sample standard deviation, 4.6188. 4.6188. And so that confirms that we have used the calculator correctly. If you have a down arrow, you can start scrolling down and it will give you more data values, like your median. You don't want to sort the numbers yourself, calculator will find the median for you. And the Casio will also find your mode, which is kind of nice. The TI doesn't do that. And there are actually more data values as you scroll down. So that's how you would use your Casio. To use the TI, works pretty much the same way. You would hit, let's see if we can go back here. You're going to hit stat and then edit, because we want to edit the numbers. So we'll pick edit, execute, or number 1. And then just like with the Casio, you have different lists going across the top there. And what I did in that list was I entered in the second problem that we did for me yesterday, entered those numbers in that list going down. But that's one of the things I left out to try to speed up the video a bit. When you go to calculate it, we don't have like a calculate option going across the bottom, so we hit stat, and the calculate option for the TI is one menu option to the right, and just like with the Casio, we are going to pick one variable stats. Now, on my version of the TI, this is where I get that list check, and it's set for L2. Well, I don't have any numbers in L2 right now. I want it to be L1. If you want to change it to list 1 or list 2, you'll notice right above your numbers are your lists. So it says like 1, and then it says L1. So I'll hit second and then number 1, and that's going to change my list. So make sure that you are going to be calculating the statistics on the list in question. Older models of the TI, I think it pops up across the bottom like one variable stats, and then I think you would just hit like second, like L1, L2, whatever. You would just tell it what list you wanted it to calculate for at that point. If you have an issue with it, you guys know where to find me. Let's go down to calculate, And just like with the Casio, it's going to dump out a list of numbers. So our mean was 70. Again, the sum of the numbers, you see your capital sigma. Here, yours are in a slightly different order. So you have the sample standard deviation is 59.475, 59.48 because it rounded up, and the population standard deviation 55.06. And again, matches what we calculated by hand. The chances that you're going to make the exact same mistakes by hand that you make on the calculator are super, super rare. So they serve as a check. And if you get the same numbers, you know that you're doing it correctly. As with the Casio, you can hit that down button. You can get your quartiles, your median there, 71, and so forth. So you have a lot more values. Make sure you can do this by hand and on the calculator. By hand is okay for smaller sets of numbers. I would like to confirm that you guys can use the process, but practically speaking, if you have 50 numbers, you are not going through this process 50 times. You're going to use your calculator. So let me know if you guys have issues with that, and hopefully this video actually does upload. See you next time.